On an ordinary morning in a poor neighborhood, a 26-year-old black woman was on her way to a life-changing job interview. At the bus stop, she saw an elderly white man collapse, ignored by everyone who assumed he was drunk. Giving up her chance at the job, she bought him food and took him home. What she didn't know was that the man was the CEO of a major company, and her life was about to change forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was a quiet spring morning in the south side of the city, the kind where the air is soft but heavy with stories that never made the news. Low-rise apartment blocks, worn from weather and time, lined the cracked sidewalks. The street was already stirring. A white woman in yoga pants walked her golden retriever without making eye contact with anyone. A young Latina boy zipped past on a scooter, music blasting from his earbuds. An older man sat on his porch, sipping from a thermos and side-eyeing the figure that stepped out of building 307B. That figure was Aisha. 26 years old, black, slim build, average height, soft brown skin, her natural hair pulled back into a neat low bun. Her clothes were clean but modest, a second-hand white blouse carefully pressed, tucked into a charcoal pencil skirt. She wore flats instead of heels, practical, quiet, determined. She had no luxury of vanity, just purpose. She stood on the threshold of the apartment complex, back straight, expression calm, but if you looked closely, you'd see the flicker of nerves dancing behind her dark eyes. Inside, the tiny one-bedroom apartment held its breath. Aisha had been up since 5. She'd bathed her mother, warmed her oatmeal, checked her medication, set out a fresh blanket, and called the neighbor next door, Mrs. Alvarez, to come sit with her in case anything happened. The apartment smelled of lavender and hospital-grade hand sanitizer. It was clean, though everything was a little old. Chipped linoleum floors, a faded armchair held together with stitching and prayer, and a family photo taped to the refrigerator door. Aisha at 15. Her mother standing tall and smiling long before the stroke. Now at 26, Aisha carried the world with both hands and said nothing of its weight. She stepped onto the sidewalk and began walking briskly toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. The city around her was waking up. Traffic was thickening, car horns began their chorus, and the bakery on the corner was opening its shutters. But Aisha wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the interview. Tech Solutions, one of the biggest tech companies in the state. Aisha had applied 7 times before. This time she'd finally gotten through to the final round. Today was her shot. A position in customer operations, full-time, benefits, salary, stability, a future. The kind of future that would mean moving her mother into a safer building, maybe even a home health aide a few days a week. Maybe, finally, rest. She clutched her portfolio under one arm, straightening her blouse as she approached the corner. The bus stop was just ahead. And then it happened. 3 people were already waiting. A middle-aged white man in a suit, earbuds in, a young Asian woman scrolling on her phone, and a Latina teenager chewing gum looking bored. When Aisha approached, they all reacted. Subtle things. The man in the suit stepped a little further away, glancing at her like she didn't belong. The Asian woman clutched her purse just slightly tighter. The teenager looked at her shoes like they offended her. Aisha had seen it before, too many times. The way people's faces closed up when they saw her skin. The way silence wrapped around her like a wall. She didn't flinch. She never did. She had learned how to be invisible, how to stand still, quiet, respectable, so no one could say she was a threat, or angry, or one of those. She'd mastered that art. The painful dance of making other people feel comfortable while you yourself disappeared. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk, not too close, not too far, waiting for the bus like everybody else, clutching her bag tighter. She breathed deeply, letting the morning air settle her nerves. Her phone buzzed, a reminder, interview 8:30 IMM, don't be late. She smiled faintly, nodded to herself. I won't. The sky was beginning to glow. Soft orange light spreading across the tops of buildings. In that moment, despite everything, Aisha felt something warm inside her, a sense of pride. She'd made it this far, despite the poverty, despite the stairs, despite every invisible door that had once slammed shut in her face. She had pressed a clean blouse. She had walked out of that apartment with her head held high. She was going to get that job, today, or so she thought. Aisha's breath fogged slightly in the morning chill as she stood still at the corner, eyes trained on the horizon where the number 17 bus would soon appear. The city was fully awake now, sirens in the distance, garbage trucks grinding through alleys, the clink of storefront gates rolling upward. She checked her phone. 7:58, still on time, just barely. The atmosphere around the bus stop was tense in the way that public places often are, a forced civility laced with indifference. Nobody spoke, no one smiled. The man in the suit still kept his distance, casting sidelong glances that suggested discomfort rather than curiosity. The young woman with the purse had repositioned herself so her shoulder half turned away from Aisha, as though creating an invisible line of safety. The teenager now had her phone out, angled just far enough to make it clear Aisha was included in her world. Aisha knew this ritual well. She'd grown up with it, the subtle exclusion, the small signals of distrust that said, "You don't belong." It was in the way people avoided eye contact, in how store employees followed her just one aisle too many, in how cab drivers passed her by but picked up the next person without hesitation. It was racism that wore a polite mask in daylight, but it didn't sting any less for being silent. Still, she didn't react. She'd learned not to. Reacting gave people ammunition. Silence kept you safe. She adjusted the strap of her bag and stood still, poised, calm, heart beating a little faster with every passing second. The bus was due at 8:03 dot. She would arrive at Midtech just before 8:30. That left a margin of 10 minutes. Enough to breathe, check her teeth in the mirror, maybe run through her elevator pitch one last time in the lobby. She had rehearsed it 100 times. Her resume was crisp. Her answers were sharp. She was ready. And then something strange happened. A sound, barely more than a whisper, broke the rhythm of the morning. A low grunt, like the air being knocked from someone's lungs, followed by the unmistakable scrape of a body hitting concrete. Aisha turned. There, just a few feet from the bench, an older white man, maybe late 70s, had collapsed against the side of the shelter. His gray jacket was rumpled, his head slumped forward, and one arm lay limp on the pavement. A plastic bag had rolled from his hand, spilling a bottle of orange juice and a small packet of crackers that now lay crushed underfoot. His hat, a faded wool cap, had fallen beside him. No one moved. For a second, it was as if time froze. The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably, looked at his watch, then back at the road. The teenager gave a quick glance and returned to her phone. The woman with the purse took a careful step away. Aisha blinked, processing what she was seeing. The man wasn't drunk, at least not in the way people around her seemed to assume. His body was trembling slightly, his lips had turned pale, his breathing was shallow. "Somebody help," Aisha said, her voice clear but not loud. "I think he's probably just drunk," the teenager muttered, not looking up. The man in the suit shrugged. "Not our problem." Aisha looked at them all, disbelief flickering across her face. "He could be having a stroke," she said. The woman with the purse snorted softly. "Or he could be faking it." Aisha's heart pounded. She knew what this was, that look in their eyes. They didn't want to deal with it, sure, but it was more than that. They were waiting to see if she would go near him, if the black girl in the cheap blouse would get involved with the old white man on the ground. No one was going to help worse. They were going to watch her if she did. She hesitated, her eyes flicked toward the road, a glint of silver in the distance. The bus was coming. Her gut clenched. She could stay right here, keep her head down like everyone else. Get on that bus, nail the interview, change her life. No one would blame her. Not really. It wasn't her fault. She didn't knock the man down. She didn't ignore him for 5 minutes. She could leave and never think of this moment again. But she didn't move toward the curb. Instead, she took a slow breath, stepped forward, and knelt beside the man. "Sir," she said gently, touching his shoulder, "can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and cloudy. He tried to speak but failed. His hand reached weakly toward her, then fell. His skin was cool and clammy. She recognized the signs. Low blood sugar, maybe blood pressure, maybe both. "I'm going to get you something," she whispered. "Just stay with me." The bus rumbled up behind her. Its brakes hissed. The door opened with a familiar squeak. Aisha turned her head. The driver looked bored. He waited. "Miss?" the driver called. "You getting on?" Aisha looked at the man on the ground, then at the bus. Her interview. Her mother. Her dreams. Then back at the man. "No," she said softly. "Not today." The driver raised an eyebrow, then shrugged and closed the door. The bus pulled away. She stood, ran down the block toward the convenience store. Her shoes slapped the sidewalk. She didn't have much cash, but she didn't care. She bought a banana, a bottle of water, and a granola bar, the quickest fix she could think of. Then she sprinted back. By the time she returned, the teenager was gone. The man in the suit had boarded a ride-share. Only the woman with the purse remained, looking at Aisha like she was from another planet. Aisha knelt again, helped the man drink water, peeled the banana, coaxed him to eat. Slowly his breathing evened, his hands stopped trembling, his color returned faintly. His eyes, now more lucid, found hers. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded. "You're going to be okay. I'm going to get you home." She reached for her phone. The number 17 was gone. So was the interview window. But Aisha didn't think about that, not yet, not while this man still needed her. She didn't know it yet, but that decision, the one made in the shadow of a bus stop where no one cared, would change her life forever. The man's breathing had steadied by the time Aisha wiped his forehead with a tissue from her bag, her palms still slightly shaking, not from fear but adrenaline. The street felt quieter now, though the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars still passed, the light turned green and back again. A woman walked her dog across the street, not once glancing their way. Aisha helped him sit up against the metal bench, one hand steady on his shoulder as he chewed slowly, methodically, the banana she'd brought. His fingers were still cold. His voice was rough, but his eyes had found their focus, and they were blue, faded by age but intense. For a moment he just looked at her, not speaking, like he was trying to place her in the puzzle of his memory, though they'd never met. "You saved me," he said finally, the words dragging through his throat like they hadn't been used in days. "You didn't have to do that." Aisha smiled, a soft curve of the mouth that came more from humility than pride. "I couldn't just leave you there." He blinked slowly, clearly overwhelmed. "Others did. I noticed." His chuckle was short, raspy. "Back in my day, someone would have carried me inside, put a blanket over me, called a nurse or something. These days, people step over you like you're a pothole." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the water bottle, and Aisha gently helped him lift it to his mouth. He took a long sip, then exhaled. "I wasn't always this fragile, you know." She nodded, crouching beside him. "No one is. Until one day, they are." The truth in that made him pause. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Aisha." He repeated it once, quietly, like he was trying it out. "Beautiful name. I'm Walter, Walter Langston." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Langston," she said softly. They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then Walter said, "I was heading to see my sister. Haven't seen her in months. She lives a few neighborhoods over. Figured I'd take the bus, you know, like we used to when we were kids. There's a stop just down the street from her place." Aisha tilted her head. "You and your sister used to ride the bus together?" "Every single morning," he said, a trace of warmth sliding into his voice. "Back when we lived on Oakland Avenue. We'd walk half a mile in the snow some days, just to catch that number 6. She'd pack us both peanut butter sandwiches in a brown bag. We'd sit in the very back row. Always the back. That's where you sat if you were black back then." Aisha froze slightly, unsure how to respond, but Walter caught the look on her face and chuckled again, this time with more breath. "Yeah, I know. Doesn't look like it, right? White old man like me talking about riding in the back." "A little unexpected," she admitted. "Well, my sister and I, we weren't exactly conventional," he said with a smirk. Let's just say we weren't raised to follow the rules everyone else did, and we paid for that. But the bus? That was freedom, our own little piece of the world for 30 minutes a day. His eyes had gone far away now, seeing something Aisha couldn't. She let him sit with that memory, holding space for it like it mattered, and it did, even if she didn't understand every layer of it. After a few minutes, Walter leaned forward slightly. "You got somewhere to be?" The question made her chest tighten. She glanced at her phone. It was 8:31. The interview had started at 8:30 sharp. She hadn't even called. She thought about lying, brushing it off, but something about this man, something about the honesty he'd shown her, made her shake her head and tell the truth. "Yes. I was supposed to be at a job interview. A big one." Walter's eyes widened. "And you gave that up for me?" "I didn't give it up," she replied carefully. "I just chose something else. For now." "Why?" His voice was quiet now, almost hesitant. She looked at him, really looked at him, the deep creases along his cheeks, the faint bruise beginning to color his temple, the vulnerability in the way he sat hunched, clutching the water bottle like a child holding a toy, "because I know what it's like to need help and be invisible." Walter stared at her, and then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "Well, damn." She smiled at that. "I should get you home," she said after a beat. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I didn't drive," he said. "I was going to take the bus, remember?" "No buses for a while," she said. "Let me get you a cab." He frowned. "That's not cheap." "I'll manage." Walter looked like he might protest again, but then he saw something in her eyes, a calm insistence that brooked no argument. He nodded. "All right, I live over in Barton Heights. White House, green shutters, corner of Glen and Maple." She booked the ride on her phone, then helped him stand slowly. He leaned heavily on her arm as they waited for the car. A few passers-by watched but didn't say anything. When the cab pulled up, Aisha opened the door, helped him in, and slid into the seat beside him. The drive was quiet. Walter dozed lightly, and Aisha let herself rest too, staring out the window as neighborhoods shifted from working-class brick to tree-lined streets with manicured hedges and bird feeders. Barton Heights was old money, she could tell, but his house was modest, a single story with peeling paint and a hand-painted welcome sign stuck into the dirt by the mailbox. She helped him up the walkway. He refused to let her go inside. "I'm all right now," he said, patting her hand. "You've done more than enough, Aisha." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I've got soup in the freezer and my sister on speed dial. I'll live." She started to turn, but he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad, tearing off a page. "Here's my number, just in case you ever need anything. Anything, you understand?" She took the paper. "Thank you. I mean it," he said, and for a moment his eyes were fierce. "What you did today, most people wouldn't." She smiled, a little sad now. "Most people weren't raised by my mother." With that, she turned and walked back down the street, the cab already gone. She didn't have a plan, just her bag, her name tag, and the sense that something bigger than a missed appointment had just happened. But she didn't know yet how big. Not yet. The streets blurred past Aisha as she sat stiffly in the back of the second cab, her hands gripping her portfolio tight against her chest as though it might shield her from what was coming. She hadn't looked at her phone again. She didn't need to. The weight in her gut told her everything she already knew. The time had passed, the moment had slipped. But still she had to try. There was something in her that refused to give up completely, even when logic said there was no point. So she sat upright, face forward, posture composed, the same way her mother used to sit when talking to doctors who spoke over her, underestimating her because of the chair and the accent and the skin. The cab turned down a wide boulevard lined with office buildings made of glass and ambition. Midtech's headquarters stood like a monolith of brushed steel and modern design, sleek, towering, impersonal. Aisha stepped out onto the sidewalk and felt, for the first time that morning, a flush of self-consciousness. She smoothed her skirt, tugged at her blouse, wiped her palms on the sides of her thighs. Her flats clicked faintly as she approached the doors, which whooshed open with an automated whisper. The lobby was cool, pristine, and smelled of fresh-cut orchids and filtered air. Behind the front desk stood a woman in a navy blazer with a headset and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, without looking up fully, already typing something into her computer. "Yes, I'm here for the 8:30 interview with the customer ops team. My name is Aisha Franklin. I know I'm late, but—" She didn't finish the sentence, didn't offer the story, the explanation. She knew better. People didn't want reasons. They wanted results. Her voice was steady, but her throat burned. The woman finally looked at her, eyes flicking over Aisha's face, then her clothes, her bag, her skin. A pause. Not cruel, just habitual. "One moment." She tapped a few keys, then tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry, the interviews for that role wrapped about 15 minutes ago. The team's already moved on to internal meetings for the day." Aisha absorbed the words like a quiet blow to the stomach. Not unexpected, but still sharp. She nodded, kept her expression neutral. "May I still leave my portfolio?" she asked. The woman hesitated, then reached for it politely. "Of course. I can pass it along." "Thank you." Aisha handed it over, resisting the urge to apologize again. She had nothing to be sorry for, not really, but still, she felt the sting of being out of place, of being the person walking in too late, too quiet, too black, too poor, too real. She turned to leave, footsteps echoing slightly in the vast open space of the lobby. She hadn't noticed earlier how enormous it was, how everything, from the curved ceiling to the glass staircases, seemed designed to make a person feel small. The receptionist's voice had returned to cheerful as she answered a new call, talking to someone who was clearly not late, not out of breath, not walking away from a door that had been shut quietly but firmly in their face. Aisha paused near the glass exit, looking out at the city beyond. She could see the bus stop 2 blocks down, where the number 17 had passed her by. She could see people in suits moving quickly, not looking at each other, and somewhere in the distance a street musician began playing something slow and mournful on a saxophone. She almost laughed at the timing of it, how cinematic it all felt, except this wasn't a movie, this was just life. She exhaled slowly, letting the disappointment settle in her bones, not trying to fight it any more. She'd known this risk when she knelt beside that man. She had done the math, weighed the loss. But what she hadn't accounted for was this particular ache. Not just the missed opportunity, but the confirmation of every voice that had ever told her good people finish last, that sacrifice is a luxury only the privileged can afford. As she stood there, suspended between self-respect and self-doubt, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass door. Blouse slightly wrinkled now, face flushed from the sun and stress, but eyes steady, jaw firm. She looked tired, yes, but not defeated. Behind her, a door somewhere down the hall clicked open. She didn't turn. Someone's shoes clicked against the polished marble floors, a slow, measured rhythm. She assumed it was an employee, maybe one of the executives. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides. She didn't want to be seen lingering like a stray. She took a step toward the exit, then a voice, deep, familiar, weathered, called out behind her, "Miss Franklin?" She stopped, turned, and saw a figure stepping out from a hallway near the elevators, walking slowly but with purpose. His posture was slightly stooped, but there was no mistaking him. Walter Langston. He wasn't wearing the rumpled jacket from this morning. Now he was dressed in a crisp white dress shirt, tucked into charcoal slacks, a muted tie knotted at the collar. His gray hair had been combed back, and though his face still bore the shadow of his earlier exhaustion, he looked sharper now, alert, composed. In his right hand he held a small leather-bound notepad, and on his face was something between disbelief and amusement. "I thought I recognized that voice," he said. The receptionist blinked. "Mr. Langston?" But he didn't answer her. He was already walking toward Aisha. Aisha stood frozen. Her brain was still trying to reconcile the man she had fed water to an hour ago with the one now standing confidently in front of her. "Mr. Langston? "You work here?" she asked cautiously. He gave a small shrug. "You could say that." She glanced toward the receptionist, who now looked visibly rattled. But she didn't say anything, and neither did Aisha. Walter's eyes narrowed kindly. "You really came anyway." "I didn't want to disappear without trying," she said quietly. He nodded once, thoughtful. "Good." A beat passed. Aisha didn't ask anything else, not yet, and Walter didn't explain, not yet, but something shifted in the air. Not quite a promise, not quite a revelation, just the sensation that something long overlooked had suddenly stepped into the light. The door had closed earlier that morning, but maybe, just maybe, another was about to open. Walter didn't say much as he led Aisha down the corridor, past modern art on polished walls and potted plants too perfect to be real. The building, with its quiet glass and sleek edges, suddenly felt less intimidating with him walking beside her. Aisha stole glances at him. Was this the same man she had crouched beside on the sidewalk earlier? He moved slowly, yes, but deliberately now, as though every step belonged to someone who had once built something from the ground up and had never forgotten what it meant to fall. He nodded politely to a young man in a blazer who passed them and looked surprised. The man did a quick double-take, then looked away. No one stopped them, no one asked questions. Walter simply moved through the space like it still remembered him. He paused outside a wide glass conference room. Inside, 3 people in business attire were gathering their laptops and notes. Aisha recognized the woman who had interviewed her on Zoom 2 weeks ago. Another man was sipping coffee, distractedly scrolling through something on a tablet. They didn't see her yet. Walter reached for the door handle and opened it smoothly, gesturing for her to follow. She hesitated, then stepped inside. All eyes turned toward them. "John," the woman said, blinking. I didn't know you were coming in today." Walter gave a small smile. "Didn't plan on it, but something changed my morning." There was a beat of silence, long enough for eyebrows to raise and a few whispered murmurs to pass between the others. One of them, a younger man with sharp features and a skeptical expression, stood straighter. "I'm sorry, are we continuing interviews?" "No," Walter said. "We're done interviewing." He turned to Aisha, and for a moment the conference room faded, the tension, the curious stares, the fluorescent lights overhead, and it was just his voice, steady and firm. "This young woman saved my life this morning," he said. "She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for anything. She gave up something important to help a stranger. And I think we all know how rare that is." The woman blinked, clearly confused. "Wait, saved you?" Walter nodded. "Collapsed on a bench a block from here. No one helped, not a soul, except her." The room was quiet. "She sat with me," he continued, his voice a little rough now, "bought me food with her own money, made sure I got home safely. I watched 6 people turn away, people dressed just like us, people with meetings and deadlines. She was the only one who stopped." The young man looked at Aisha, then back at Walter. "But the interviews were for a client operations role. We had—" "I know what the role is," Walter interrupted, gently but firmly. "I designed the damn role 15 years ago." That silenced the room completely. The woman stepped forward slightly, her tone softening. "John, are you saying—" "I'm saying we've already found who we're looking for," Walter said, turning to Aisha, "if she still wants it." Aisha's throat tightened. She felt heat rise behind her eyes, but willed it down. She nodded slowly. "I do." "Good," Walter said simply, and smiled. Not the vague, polite smile of executives, but a real one, a tired, warm smile that said, "I see you. I know what it cost you to be here." The woman extended her hand, still recovering from surprise. "Well then. Aisha, right? Welcome to mid-tech." Aisha shook her hand. She didn't know what to say. Thank you felt too small. Explaining why she'd still shown up, despite knowing the door had likely closed, felt unnecessary now. Somehow, everything she had done that morning, the choice, the wait, the doubt, the disappointment, had led here, to this unlikely room, this impossible moment. Walter turned to the others. Let's make sure she's onboarded properly. No shortcuts." As the others nodded and began murmuring logistics, he leaned close to Aisha and said quietly, "There's something I didn't mention earlier." She looked up. "I didn't go to that bus stop today because I had to," he said. "I went because today is my sister's birthday. She passed last year. Every year we used to meet for lunch on this day, take the same bus we used to take to school when we were kids. We talk about the past, about how far we'd come. I went today just to feel close to her, but I didn't expect to collapse. I didn't expect anyone to notice, let alone stop. But you did." Aisha was quiet for a long moment. "She must have been proud of you." He smiled, then looked away, blinking quickly. "If she met you, she'd say the same about you." Outside, the city buzzed on. Buses came and went, people hurried to their meetings, stared at their phones, made judgments in glances. But in that glass room on the 4th floor of a building built on someone's dream, a girl who was always told to keep her head down had lifted it, and someone unexpected, unannounced, had looked back at her and said, "Yes, you. We see you." It wasn't charity, it wasn't pity. It was recognition, and it was enough. As Aisha stepped back into the lobby with her official packet in hand and a start date on paper, the receptionist gave her a different kind of glance. Curious now, even a little respectful. Aisha met her gaze calmly, then turned toward the glass doors that had once felt like walls. This time they opened with the same quiet hiss, but now they let her through. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.